We're going to study from Tes with the Rabash, Part 4, Answer 87, continuing from the 12th type. We should say this, that if there's a difference between the descending reflected light coming to an empty vessel without a beating, or if I say no, that he doesn't want to receive it, he overcomes it. What does he overcome? That if a new light comes from a tzilut, so that's all that's left. That's why he overcomes it. The sparks have already came out. He can't receive anymore. Which part? Well, it's not written. What is written? That those sparks disappeared. How much? What? He doesn't let us know. So, the 12th kind of reflected light is the above-mentioned sparks after they have been put out. They do not illuminate anymore. How are they put out? They are sparks. We've learned that light that comes from the descending reflected light. Why do we say that they were put out? So he explains, after the illumination of the coupling left the upper phase, for then the record overpowers them. The record overpowers them. So what's written here? We learned what is the beating, that it's two opposite forces to one another. Each one has something that the other doesn't have. And all the force of overcoming, that the sparks were falling, because there's an illumination on the coupling. Let's say it shines from phase 3 or phase 4, so it's only a record. The record that remained inside, he says it comes out as the tagin on the otiot, the Ari says, and the sparks enter the empty vessels. Because the coupling was shining upon them. Then we learn that Malchut ascended to Binah, meaning also phase 3 was refined. So it turns out that everything about phase 4 on phase 3 came from the illumination of the coupling. But after that coupling departed, so what do we have on behalf of these sparks? Only records, meaning record of phase 3. Then again, the record of phase 4 returns into the vessel, and the record of phase 3 come out. We find, according to that the sparks would illuminate in the internality of the vessels. So the coupling departed. They do not shine inside the vessels. That's what he calls about the sparks that turned out. So there was the reflected light that came out. And the records that came before, as the tagin on the letters, they enter again. That's called the 12th type. Now look inside. The 12th kind of reflected light is sometimes that the Ari mentioned is the above mentioned sparks after they have been put out. When were they put out? Meaning after the illumination of the coupling left in the upper phase, for then the record overpowers them, because this record is from a higher degree than the ones that remain. 88. What are the 10 kinds of vessels in Akudim? 10 types of vessels in Akudim, he's asking. So the answer is the first is phase for itself. What is phase for itself? Receives in order to receive. Over which the first restriction occurred. That's the essence of phase 4, called Malchut. The second vessel, vessels of the Rosh, which are only the roots of the vessels. The third is the vessels from Peh downward, which are mixed with the lights. We learn that the Parzuf Ta'amim that came from the vessels, received in order to bestow. So there's an equal relation. That's why it's not called a vessel within a deficiency. The fourth is the above vessels, from Peh and below after the departure. Why did the lights depart? Because they couldn't bestow anymore, to receive in order to bestow. So they receive. That's what we call the courses of Malchut. It's called receiving, not bestowing. So what is? The fourth is the above vessels from Peh and below after the departure, which are distinguished as coarse light. He calls them vessels. No, the fifth are the emptied vessels, are emptied of their lights and contain records. So we learn that phase 4 was the apparent vessel. After the departure of the light, it's called the apparent vessel. So now he says, what is 5? He says it's the vessels that are emptied of their lights and contain records. The 6 are the vessels that are emptied of their lights and do not contain records. We learn that Malchut does not leave a record. Everything Malchut has, it receives what shines to her. That the light of Yesod shines to the vessel of Malchut. That's what he mentions. So it's not her own record. There's already a difference between a vessel with a record and the vessel of Malchut that doesn't have its own record. So what we learned, again, he wants to clarify the Ari's words here. That he says that Malchut does not leave a record, and all the vessels don't leave records. So he says, why do we need a record? Because it needs to shine to the vessel under them. Keter shines to the lower one, Chokhmah to the lower one. That's what the Ari mentioned. But Malchut has no one to shine to. There is no discernment that the lower one lets her shine. That's why the light of Yesod, of the record, in order to let the Malchut shine. We learned that yesterday. The question is, what does that mean? What does it mean that it has no record of its own? Only a record of something below her. The Rosh is already inside. You won't understand that. That's according to the Ali. There's a lot of matters here. For instance, he mentions that the phase of Keter departed, and the light of Chokhmah illuminates. So we're lacking the light of Keter. So he says that the record of Keter shines on the degree of Chokhmah. When phase 3 was refined and only phase 2 illuminates, so we're lacking 2 lights. The records complete the 10 Sefirot. When phase 1 was refined, lacking Binah, so the record of Binah shines to the vessel of Zer Anpin. When Zer Anpin was refined to the Malchut, meaning the coarseness of root, so we say that the light of Yesod illuminates phase 1 on the degree of Malchut. Even though Malchut was refined, what record will complete the 10 Sefirot? Because if the coarseness of root was refined and Keter, there's nowhere to illuminate to. That's why he said no one could illuminate, so it doesn't leave a record. There are more explanations, but if you learn it this way, that's okay. The 7th are vessels prepared for the male phases of the second expansion. These are the records that remain in their vessels. The 8th are vessels that were prepared for the female phases in the second expansion. They came from the sparks. Sparks of phase 3 fell into phase 4. We find the degree of Chokhmah to the degree of Keter, and the opposite. That from those sparks, they caused vessels of females to expand. The 9th are vessels below the taboo, which are unfit to receive direct light. Now he was speaking until the taboo, now he's speaking below the taboo. The 10th are the external vessels for the reception of surrounding lights. That he doesn't mention a lot. External vessels for the reception of surrounding lights.
Item 77. The 10th kind. 77. The 10th kind is the external vessels for surrounding light. No surrounding light is received in a degree unless it is received from its upper phase, from its opposite phase in the Rosh. Hence, it needs to receive a vessel suitable for this light. Meaning the vessel should also be from the upper phase, from its opposite phase in the Rosh. Example. If the degree is from phase 4, it needs a vessel that will be from phase 3. What is he telling us here? He wants to explain external vessels for surrounding light. So he says a rule. No surrounding light is received in a degree unless it is received from its upper phase, from its opposite phase in the Rosh. phase 4 vessel, if the coupling that was performed on the rosh of phase 4, this kli is called an internal kli. And what is above the phase that it's against it? Hence, it needs a vessel suitable for this light, meaning the vessel should also be from the upper phase, from its opposite phase in the rosh. And if the degree is from phase 4, what does it mean? What's the inner phase of phase 4? It needed an external vessel. It needs a vessel that will be from phase 3. If it is from phase 3, then she needs to receive, and from wanting to receive above the phase against her. From phase 2, etc., therefore the vessels of surrounding light were called external light vessels, because from the perspective of the vessels, it is always considered that more refined is more external. 78. These external vessels are attained in the degree only by ascending to the degree above it. This is done during the ascent of the lights to the emanator. I'll tell you what's difficult here. We learned when the vessel became empty from phase 4, and the coupling was performed on phase 3, which is a vessel that is above it, this is considered a surrounding vessel. Again, we learned that in the world of Akudim, during the departure of the lights, vessels were made. So the Ari says a rule that to distinguish a vessel, it's considered that the light departed from it. The light departed from it 3 degrees. From 3, it's if it's similar that the light did not depart from her. So he says there like this. There was a coupling on the level of ta'amim, of tastes. So Malchut received the phase against her in Rosh, Malchut of Guf, the light of Nefesh. But since she went through 5 vessels, vessels are from the phase of Nefesh. Hence we say that there's Yechidah of Nefesh in the Kli of Malchut. In the Kli of Zeranpin, there is the light of Ruach. And since the light of Ruach is only on 4 vessels, it only has Chaya of Ruach. The Neshama is in 3 vessels. There's only Neshama of Neshama. The light of Chaya is only in 2 vessels. Keter and Chochmah, there's Ruach of Chaya. And the light of Yechidah, which descended to the Kli of Keter, there was only 1 Kli. There's only the light there of Nefesh of Yechidah. Then the refinement took place, and we learned that refinement, there's a coupling that is happening upon phase 3. He comes and says, phase 3 is above her level. If it's above her, it's considered a refined light, a purer light, an external vessel. So she receives the surrounding of it. But Zeranpin, Since the coupling was done on the phase against the Rosh upon phase 3, Zeranpin now receives Yechida of Ruach, and what was before the Kli of Nefesh receives now one surrounding instead of Mekif Chaya of phase 3, the surrounding of Chaya of phase 3. And then Zeranpin receives the phase against it, the phase of Yechida, Bina, which is above Yechida, above the place of the coupling. It lacks but one light. It turns out that in Bina, there's now Chaya of Neshama. And in Chokhmah, there are 3 phases that are higher than her. It also attained. What did she attain? Neshama of Chaya. And before that, the light of Chaya only had one vessel, 2 vessels in first stage, meaning Chaya and Nefesh of Ruach of Chaya. So now she already has Neshama of Chaya. And then phase 3 was refined, and from now phase 2 is in the coupling in the Rosh. Therefore Bina receives the phase against her, Yechida of Neshama. And since this coupling upon phase 2 and one more external degree from Zeranpin receives one surrounding. She is 3, and this is 2. It's called purer, and more purer, it receives it as a surrounding. And Malchut, since she is higher from her in 2 phases, 3 and 2, she receives the second surrounding. Who? It turns out that Malchut had a place before the inner Nanchai, and now she has 2 surroundings. So Malchut is still not separated into a vessel. And then he says that when the zivug, the coupling, was on phase 1, which is called viewing of Ak, or the observation of Ak, then Malchut receives the surrounding light. There it is distinguished as Malchut into a Kli, and there it turns out that Malchut remained in 2 surroundings from the internal Nanchai. She had 2 surroundings that she had, and she departed. Whereas Zeranpin, Malchut ascended in the Kli of Chokhmah. It turns out that Zeranpin is in the Kli of Keter near the Rosh. Zeranpin receives the higher degree from her, from Zeranpin, which is Aleph Bet 1, 2, and Zeranpin also receives the surrounding. So okay, we understand that she receives from the vessel that's above her actual phase as a surrounding matter. What is hard for me? We learned from phase 3 she receives the descending reflected light and the beating and the sparks. From what phase is he talking now? That's the only thing that we have to explain.